Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Box to OneDrive migration. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to the folks joining from different parts of the globe. My name is Noor Basha, Marketing Director at Migrate Technologies, and I'll be a moderator for today's webinar. As you all know, today's topic for the session is like how to migrate Box to OneDrive of a business. And in this next 30 minutes, we will learn what are the basic problems faced during the migration, some of the best practices, and the importance of choosing the right tool during this migration. So before we get started, let me highlight a few housekeeping items. During the webinar, please feel free to post questions and we will try to answer them as many as we can at the end. And we are recording this session and we'll be sharing the presentation and recording in next 24 to 48 hours with you. So with this, let me introduce you to today's session speaker, my colleague Sandeep Nahata, who is a technical architect at Migrate Technologies, and Sandeep brings close to 18 plus years of experience in the IT industry, of which like 14 years is predominantly into modern collaboration space. So at Migrate, he specializes in designing, deploying solutions to our end customers using Azure, Office 365, and SharePoint. So with this brief intro, let me quickly hand it over to Sandeep so that he can take it over from here and help us understand the best practices in terms of migrating Box to OneDrive. Sandeep, over to you.
Thank you, Noor, and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on from where you're logging in to this webinar. And I think Noor, I've given a good introduction about the background. This is going to be a little bit of a session. It's a 30-minute session to cover up what exactly Box is, OneDrive is, what kind of challenges you can face when you're moving between Box and OneDrive. So I'll just talk quickly about agenda. So agenda for today is just to give a very, very quick overview of Box and OneDrive. And right away, after that, we will jump into the stages of migration. So as we know that, the tools have been matured and the technology have been matured, but something which have never changed is the behavior of users, the overall experience. So it's very important that migration planning it has to be done right. So this webinar will more or less focus a lot on those aspects, not to miss things to make it a successful migration. We will talk at end around some best practices and migration performance, how to achieve those, what are the things which can help you. And certainly we'll take up some questions at the end of the webinar. Noor will be noting down all those questions and we can take them one by one at the end of the webinar. Great. So I'll start with the Box versus OneDrive. I think that's like one of the questions which a lot of organizations are also thinking between Box versus OneDrive. What features do you get to take you to the next level? So Box is definitely one of the great tools for sharing and collaborating when you have a lot of files around your workstations and with your colleagues. Also, users can determine basically where the content has to be shared, with what kind of users it can be shared. And it comes with a sync tool, so to say, a box sync. It's called as box sync, which let you synchronize your files between your computer and your online Box account. So that's how Box works. It's also cloud-based tool. But then we have the next sort of level of collaboration environment of OneDrive, the latest type of file sharing system, which is the most important part of OneDrive being it's an integral part of Office 365 and SharePoint Server. So that gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you share. You can take you have flexibility of moving to the next level into SharePoint when the time arrives, and along with that you have multi-device support. You can work from any device and you can work on any kind of Office document and PDFs. So basically OneDrive, you don't really have to have installations for Office documents, and it just became very easier to do a lot of things in the browser itself or a mobile itself without really installing any kind of the real bits of the Office product. So this one takes you a little bit to a next level. Why it is important for this particular webinar is it's very important to understand, because once we understand the difference between two tools, this will help you and also understand what kind of mapping will be needed when you are planning to migrate, because migration is not just picking up something from Box and just dropping into OneDrive. It's also important that we understand what features of the Box were used by the end users, by your organization, and accordingly have a proper mapping into OneDrive. Understanding this difference will definitely help you plan a more well-aware migration plan, and that way the user experience will not change. They will in fact have better experience in OneDrive rather than losing it. So very quickly, I'll talk about how Box Open Store Share works. It uses, you have to download your files from Box to be able to work on them, and then use the Box sync. We talked about that. Then you have to use your Box sync to sync it back to the server. This will become very easy in OneDrive. Automatically, once you move the files into OneDrive, the files will be able to open right away from your desktop, from your tablets, from your mobile apps. Directly you can use them. No additional software is required, and also no authentication required, because once you pretty much log in into Office 365, everything is seamless. All the file types are seamless. In case of Box, each and every, when you move from Word to PPT to Excel or any other Office file, you have to authenticate again and again, because you are pretty much using a desktop version of the product. Collaboration side, multiple users can simultaneously edit in Box. The same features are available in OneDrive. You don't have to do anything new. OneDrive pretty much is multi-editor right now. So when the different sections of the document can be edited by different set of people at the same time, and they will get to see who is making what kind of change, and they can accept it. It's a great tool for a lot of when you have deadlines and multiple people have to work to deliver a proposal within 4 hours. So these kind of things are available in OneDrive. Permission levels. I think this is one of the most simplest one, I will say. Box comes with, it becomes very confusing because they have different varieties of roles available and permission level available. Co-owner, editor, view uploader, then viewer uploader, then they have viewer. So it's a little bit confusing in the permission level side when somebody get introduced to Box and they have to use their personal Box, whereas it is more simplified in OneDrive. You just have view, edit. There are only two simplified levels, so that becomes very easier for you to share across different users from your team or maybe outside. Comments and notes, supported threads are available in Box Drive, but you have to install a lot of other apps. You have to do separate installation to extend your Box, whereas OneDrive is a single product which will let you help into do all the threaded comments within your Office 365, because it's part of Office 365. So pretty much you can use it anywhere across any of the product. Enough of, I think, discussion. I think we got little bit idea that the webinar is about Box to OneDrive. We understand the Box. What are the new features of OneDrive? The very next stage, the very next important aspect of the whole migration is always a good planning. So I have a slide here, which is a 5-stage sort of a planning in which we have 5 phases. This is more into alignment with the Microsoft best practices. Obviously, every organization can come up with their own 6th stage, or maybe they can have 4 stage. So they can combine 2 of the stages, but this is more in alignment with Microsoft recommendations on the best practices for any kind of migration. So we will just align our discussion also along the same line, so that it becomes more easy to map. The first stage being migration planning. We will dig a little bit more detail into migration planning, which is all about stages, knowing what data goes where, then assessing and remediating it. Once you have to check what you have at hand, what need to be moved, and if you know some problems upfront, then how we are going to be basically rectifying those. Obviously, the third stage is very simple, and it's another important aspect of it is preparing your OneDrive environment, which means it has to be in a good shape of users and things like that before we can even think of moving the data. The fourth stage is the real migration. We will talk about a couple of aspects of migration. Last but not the least, the user onboarding. So, I mean, users are the whole, the whole migrations is around users, how to have the best experience. So user onboarding from beginning to end is very important to, for such kind of a migration. This slide has a lot of text, so I'll very quickly go over it. This is a little bit more detailed around each of the stages: migration planning, assessment, remediating, preparing your OneDrive, migrating, and user onboarding. So one of the key aspects of migration planning is what content goes where. You have Box. You can use, most organization uses Box for their personal use as well as for teams. Like you might be having a sales team. Let me show you. So the very first thing you need to do is plan an assessment, because you need to know how Box has been used in your environment, in the current source environment. What kind of files are private files, what kind of files are shared files across the team or maybe across a department. So that is very important. Then discovery. Obviously, once that assessment report comes into picture, you need to understand that the details of it, and then plan your target environment accordingly. The amount of content, obviously, right? When you are moving the content, there might be a lot of content which is not being touched or used for a long time. There is no point in moving it. So the amount of content migrate is also part of the migration planning discovery phase. User onboarding, this is just a bullet point. We will see more details around it. It is more from the perspective of how do you communicate well in advance to your upfront to your users, to make sure that they know what's going on and their content is moving, they are in line with you, and they can help you rather than complaining, saying that, hey, I'm losing my content. But they will be more, okay, we know the migration is going on, okay, we see some gaps, can you help us to fix those? It will be very important. This is a very simple slide which talks about as the mapping of the data. You have a Box user one on the left hand side. If you see here, my mouse points to it. So it's totally used for personal reasons. I have been maintaining my pay slips and all kind of things, because Box does allow those kind of things. I don't want it to be shared with everyone. Obviously, these are very specific to me. So I will map them. The mapping will say they'll go to their personal library. In OneDrive, as you know, you have the shared libraries and the personal libraries, which let you control your permissions. So the mapping will be prepared in such a way that it will go to the personal drive, not the shared ones. Whereas shared, as the name suggests, they will have they will have their own URL, but they'll be more open to the teams. So once you move it, at that time, if a particular file, let's take an example of a Word file which have 5 contributors in the metadata, automatically in the shared drive, all 5 will get access to that as a contributor. You don't have to do a lot, because the OneDrive takes care of reading the metadata from the file, who is the owner of the file, who is the contributor to the particular file. If there are multiple, it gives access to all the multiple users. There's another one for sales and legal, similar way. So shared libraries, and you can create as many as shared libraries as you want. It's pretty much, there is no limit to it. So based on your structure of the organization, it could be a team-based shared library, or it could be a department-based shared library, or it could be a division-based shared library. Moving on. Okay, Box. So again, there is a little bit of again, how the mapping works between the Box and OneDrive. As we talked about in initial slides, that there is a difference between how Box works versus OneDrive, and this slide basically takes that into essence. Look into your assessment when you have ran a tool on your existing content, or you might have done some scripting, but then you realize that, okay, my content has to be moved. So we will face these kind of common scenarios where you know that, okay, I have a file which has only been used by me. So it's very simple. OneDrive, it will go as a private library. As an owner, the content should be migrated to OneDrive. There is no doubt about it. I am not sharing it with anybody else. So if a folder have multiple co-owners, co-admins in the box, so automatically content will be migrated to appropriate shared library, and SharePoint or OneDrive will take care of it, providing all the permissions to it. Shared, there is a feature which is called shared with box. That's a new feature in box. Similar to that, there's another feature in OneDrive which is called share with me. So it's more about finding out what files belongs to me versus what are shared with me by other users. So there is one-to-one mapping between that. Once you move it, based on the sharing information which is available, it will automatically set up the view. This will make it easier for you to use the files not only in OneDrive but also in Outlook and other Office 365 products. Okay, again, this is step number 2. We talked about planning. Planning is all about finding the content and things like that, but then the analysis part of it. So there are a lot of tools available in market which let you assess your tool. Couple of them are free. There are a couple of them from one of them is from Microsoft, and couple of the product which are there in Migrate in the market for migration. They let you assess your tool, assess your environment using the assessment tool. So do assess it. A lot of people, a lot of clients which we have worked with, they go with scripting. Scripting is limited because it doesn't really get that deep into different versions, different type of storage information. So that's why I personally recommend to use assessment tool, which is by third party. That gives you very detailed information, and it will give you a more better picture of what's going on. So once you do the assessment on your production environment, look into the reports in details, identify all the problems, the red, highlight them, and then look for the remediations. There could be a regular issue. I'll give you a couple of examples. So one of the very common example of what kind of problems you face during assessment is file extensions. Based on what kind of industry you are in, you might be using more than just the Word file. It's not just about Word, PowerPoint, Excel, or PDF. It'll be some drawings, some Photoshop files. It could be some video files and things like that. So it's very important before you move from one environment to another that you understand what kind of files are supported by the destination environment. So find all your file extensions, list down, see what files can be moved, what will not be moved. So it's there's a list of files which are available for OneDrive. You can get that information from Microsoft, that what kind of files it is supported by OneDrive. There is next level of files which are supported by OneDrive, but they are blocked by default. That means you need to go and enable them. You need to understand the implications, but you can enable them and still upload the files. And then the third type of files are which are not allowed at all to be uploaded into OneDrive. So you need to plan for that that thing also. The second big issue is always the file and folder names. When you're on a Windows environment and you have a box folder, there is no limit how many levels of drill down you can do. You can go have unlimited length of folder names, fancy names and big names, and then below that you can have a hierarchy of another set of folders. So there is no problem with that. But when you're moving the same structure into web, there's a lot of limitations. It has been increased with 2019, but you still have to limit yourself into a 400 character when it comes to your length of the file. So it's very important to understand, and the characters which is in your file name. So again, for each and every environment, like for OneDrive, there's a list of characters which are available, which are supported, and recently they have started supporting hash and percentage, which was not supported in the initial versions of Office 365 and OneDrive, but now they are supported. So again, the same thing is the support is based on some settings. Some of them are directly supported, some of them are configurable to support, and some of the special characters are not at all supported. So it's very important to assess it, to look for the solution and then plan your next steps. Okay, the next one is the file and folder length. I talked a little bit about it. It should not exceed the structure, the length of the web URL have a 400 character limit. If your file have a too long names, you might have to cut short it. You have to plan, do you want to cut it right away, or do you want to run a kind of a internal campaign to find out what should the new name of the files. So all these exercises has to be done much upfront before you can really think of migrating. Last but not the least is the large drives and the complex sharing. These kind of drives in organizations where you are used to of not creating too many folders, what happens is people keep putting lot of files in one single folder. These are called large drives basically, and there can be many unique permissions around the folders, and the biggest challenge being on the OneDrive side, there is a limit on a folder because it's a web-based tool. So, and you want to use it on tablet and mobile. So what you need to make sure is the files has to be properly arranged, or the information architecture of your files has to be split into sub folders within your OneDrive, so that you get a very good experience. Otherwise, all the views which are going to load 50,000 document list, they're just going to take forever. It's going to be a slow performance. So any drive which you have on the box, or any folder which you have in the box which have too many files, has to be restructured first before you can think of moving it into OneDrive. And the classification can be again based on your division, on a project area or a team, or looking into what kind of activities they are performing. Accordingly you can do that split, but that has to be done definitely before. Step number 3, as I mentioned, is pretty straightforward. Microsoft have been doing a great job, I feel, in giving it like a piece of cake kind of a thing. OneDrive environment is pretty much you set up a synchronization between your Active Directory, and it will copy all your users. It will create all the accounts for the users in your Office 365. You just need to go and validate it, and once the users are there in OneDrive, then only we can think of migrating, because you're migrating the files of the users. They need to map properly into OneDrive, so that you can really get access to those. You can become contributor. All the permissions need to be automatically mapped. All this is possible only when you take the step of synchronizing all your Active Directory users. There's a phase we will be talking about a little bit about the pilot migration. So in that case, it could be that you move a little bit of users for piloting. Once you like it, you move fully. But the idea is before migration, it has to be complete. Like all the users has to be there to start a full migration. So that was all about preparing. There is nothing much to prepare on OneDrive side other than just setting up the users. This is the real migration part I was talking about. So for any migration to become successful, it's very important we do a quick POC. OneDrive environment might be very new. Even though we have read about the differences between the two tools, we have talked about the mapping between tool A and tool B, which is Box and OneDrive. But when you really run the tool, when you really start the migration, you'll experience different kind of issues which can occur when you really are going to run a full set of migration for all your users. So it's very important you do a pilot migration, select a very small set of users who are tech savvy and who understands it. The goal of the pilot is always just to see the process, how much time it is taking, what kind of performance are you getting, and also maybe run a user communication so that you can get a feedback upfront that users are complaining about, okay, this particular email does not really communicate a lot about it. So these things are important for pilot migration. Once your pilot migration is successful, you have solved all your issues. The next step will be to moving into the remainder of the migration. At that time, you can do all the other things like plan a cutover date. Also based on your pilot migration, you can assess how many days it is going to take, and accordingly communicate it to all the users that within a month time, within a 6 months time, within a 3 months time, you're going to be complete. So it's very important. Here's a list of a couple of tools which are available. Microsoft Fast Track is one of the tool available from Microsoft, where they let you quickly copy all your files into a drive. You can ship it to Microsoft, and then Microsoft makes sure that it copies all the files based on your mapping Excel into OneDrive. That's the fastest way to do a migration. That you copy everything into a drive, give it to Microsoft, and Microsoft will copy it over to OneDrive. The other way to do it is all the migration service providers, like WinWire is one of them. So use third-party service providers who have been doing these kind of activities from a very long time, who have expertise around migrating the, not only the content but the experience. I think that's one of the key thing is very important, is not just migrate the content but experience. Take the explore your professional services, and who understands all the application around it, and a whole list of partners are available with Microsoft Partner Center, which can be explored. One of the very key important things of migrating Box to OneDrive is to understand that based on what kind of files, the speed will change. Like if they are very lightweight files, ISO files and video files, you can expect up to 2 terabyte per day. These are statistics from Microsoft. They have done some level of testing, and that's what they recommend. Light files goes 2 terabyte. If they are bigger files, bigger than 1.5 MB, the speed be 1 terabyte per day. And if they are very heavy files and the list content, it can go up to 250 GB per day, not more than that. So this is like a 24/7. If you run something, you can move up to 250 GB of data if you're moving lists and libraries and the small files. Once you do migrate, also plan one thing which is very important, is verification. Upfront, write your use cases, what you want to test, and what you want to check in the destination. So plan out all those test cases upfront so that you can easily validate the content has been migrated properly. Step number 5, as I talked about, it's a picture which pretty much talks about a very simple thing, that from beginning to end, make sure your communication is good. You train your help desk. They know when the migration is going to start, so they understand why the calls are coming, why people are asking about where the content is. They should understand all those questions upfront. Also, all the organizations should be aware of the prepared downtime, and they should also understand the assurance of that, hey, you are not losing any sort of content, don't worry about it, nothing will be overridden. So also some of the organizations give you a choice of opt out, like if you don't really want to go from Box to OneDrive, you can stay in OneDrive. All these things are part of user onboarding, which need to be done to make sure that all the users are with you, and the migration is definitely successful only when the support is there from the end users. Okay, so we'll talk very quickly about migration performance. Couple of things which will definitely impact your migration performance is the network infrastructure, as I talked about, file size, the migration time, what time of the day you are doing. Do you want to do it 24/7? Do you want to do it only off hours, so that people can still use your box in the daytime? So all those things also important. And the throttling. Throttling is nothing but when you're doing too much of migration, Microsoft itself try to block some of the network. So you need to make sure the Microsoft representative is well aware that you are performing a migration, and they don't throttle all your migration activities. So throttling is also very important, which impacts a lot on migration performance. Microsoft migration tool is available. Also there are many third-party tools available, but SharePoint migration tool is available. It pretty much talks, it works on OneDrive also, which will let you assess your environment and give you a very detailed report. This can connect to a box and also give you a report around how the box was used in your environment before you plan any kind of migration. Yeah, I think we are right on time. It's 10. So these are our basically the website URL, email, blog, and Twitter. But I'll just quickly open it for any Q&A. Any questions you have. Noor, also, have you received any questions? We can take it up right away.
Yeah. Thanks, Sandeep, for taking up that quick session. Really helpful and lots of insights in terms of insights as well as the best practices from the Microsoft to migrate that content from Box to OneDrive. Yeah, there are like a couple of questions. The first question from John is how migration tool selection impacts this entire process.
Okay, tool selection. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a definite technical question, but yes, I think tool can impact a lot because not all the tools are gives you same speed. Some tool uses the newer APIs of Microsoft for migration. They are usually faster. The speed which I showed you are when you're using the latest APIs. All the newer tools like ShareGate, Metalogics, Docav, there are and Fly. These are the tools which are using the newer versions of Microsoft API. Others are maybe upgrading it, but that definitely impacts your performance. In terms of speed. Otherwise, you'll be not getting such a speed which was shown in the slide.
Great. Thanks, Sandeep. So other question from Mark is, can you slightly elaborate on external permission best practices?
External permissions. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Box allows you to do external sharing with end users, but unfortunately, when you migrate, at the time it will not be copied over because the external permissions were done using the Box account, and when you map it into OneDrive, it will become basically Office 365 account. So there is no one-to-one mapping for external sharing. During the assessment process of your migration, make sure you look into the tab which talks about what all files have been shared by external users, and you need to again judge that out of 100 files which has been shared by external users, do you really want to copy them all 100? And if you say okay, only 50 are relevant, those has to be done manually. So that's a little bit of manual effort which need to be performed to reshare those files which have been shared using Box.
Great. Thanks, Sandeep. I know we are already over 2 minutes, but I have a couple of more questions. What I will do is let's take those questions offline in the interest of time. So let me thank everyone for joining this session. Hope you find it informative and useful. Like in case if you have additional questions, please write it to us at marketing@winwire.com and we will take them offline. Thanks, Sandeep, for taking time and delivering this session. Really helpful. Have a good day.
Thank you, Noor. Thank you so much for arranging this, and thanks everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.